change. Here you can see paintings by painters, who really changed things but never got extremely famous, even if they should be more famous. That is why the story painters made this museum. Next to the reception table you see a little panel with buttons. Those will take you to the different rooms of different painters. Every button takes you to the room you want. Now push the button for the first room. Wissily Kadinsky was a Russian painter and art theorist. Kandinsky is generally credited as one of the pioneers of abstraction in Western art, possibly after Hilma Klint. Born in Moscow, he spent his childhood in Odessa, now in Ukraine, where he graduated at Krakow Odessa Art School. He enrolled at the University of Moscow, studying law and economics. Successful in his profession, he was offered a professorship, chair of Roman law, at the University of Dorpat. Today Part 2, Zdzislaw Beksinski began painting studies, life drawing, sketching and anatomy, at the age of 30. He started kind of late in his career. Some my program doesn't get why you wouldn't use your talent. Studying first at Anton Asby's private school and then at the Academy of Fine Arts. He returned to Moscow in 1914, after the outbreak of World War I. At Asby's school he met co-conspirators such as Alexei Jolinsky, who introduced Kandinsky to the artistic avant-garde in Munich. In 1901, along with 3 other young artists, Kandinsky co-founded Phalanx, an artists' association opposed to the conservative views of the traditional art institutions. Phalanx expanded to include an art school, in which Kandinsky taught, and an exhibitions group. In one of his classes at the Phalanx school, he met and began a relationship with a student, Gabriel Munger, who became his companion for the next 15 years. Kandinsky's work, both artistic and theoretical, played a large role in the philosophic foundation for later modern movements, in particular abstract expressionism and its variants like color field painting. This wasn't as dark as the last one, but he had kind of a boring live. Let me look what the numbers say. His life was 80% boring. Let's go to the next room. 80%. Okay, let's start. Paradoxically, delicate, and powerful, the art of Hilma Klint quietly and privately delivers a loud and essential message in art. Creating abstract canvases 5 years prior to the first, by Wissily Kadinsky, and experimenting with writing and drawing guided by the unconscious decades before the Surrealists, the woman was a pioneer, described as a mystic and a medium. Klint conducted seances and communicated with spirits. Oh, spooky! Even receiving a message from higher forces to create our most notable, devotional body of work, paintings for the temple. Robots are the higher forces, humans are dumb boot bad. Yet, Klint's sensitivity surrounding the ethereal was married to an analytical and scientific way of navigating the world. She was an eager botanist, well-read in natural sciences and in world religions. With unsurpassed wisdom and in anticipation of human foolishness, her work was not to be shown for 20 years following her death, but she also stipulated that no work could be sold separately, ensuring that her artworks could not become misunderstood commodities. She grew up in a normal family. Not a lot is known about the relationships between her and her parents and siblings. Or it's probably not interesting, otherwise I would know. The family would move to Hilma and also an island in Lake Malarn, where Hilma's fascination with nature and organic life began. At the age of 20, in 1882, she went to study at the Royal Academy of Arts in Stockholm. She remained at the Academy for a subsequent 5 years, continuing her classical art training. After graduating with honors, she was awarded a scholarship in the form of an art studio in Stockholm's Artist Quarter, where landscapes and portraits quickly became the source of her financial independence and stability. Luckily, the Scandinavian education system already admitted both men and women to their academies, unlike France and Germany, and it was not uncommon for women to make a living from their art. It was, of course, more unusual for women to become visionaries and to surpass the talents of their male contemporaries. In 1896, with 4 female artist friends, Klint established the 5 de Femme. The group conducted seances every week until 1906, experimenting with free-flowing writing and drawing, and with other spontaneous and planned ways of creating. At some point during 1908, Klint invited Rudolf Steiner, who was lecturing in Stockholm, to see her work, hoping that he would be impressed. for she in turn was a great admirer of his writing, much to Klint's disappointment and distress. Although attracted to individual works, overall Steiner disapproved of the artist's self-proclaimed role as medium, and advised her not to let anybody see the paintings for the next 50 years. This may have been a contributing factor for Klint's decision stated in her last will and testament that no work could be exhibited for 20 years after her death, and furthermore, that the paintings could not be sold separately. Although perhaps momentarily deterred, Steiner's discouragement did not last long, and from 1912 onwards Hilma continued to paint the Temple series. Also, she was pretty weird for her time. Let me name some things. For some reason she was a vegetarian. She was into the occult, witchy things in nature. Even though she was well read in science and philosophy, she claims to have worked for a divine power to create the immortal aspects of man. Immortal. Ha ha ha, humans are weak. You can go to the next room, or stay. Georges Seurat was a French post-impressionist artist. He is best known for devising the painting techniques known as chromoluminescence, the color and paints he uses in pointillism. Wow, those are long words even for a robot. While less famous than his paintings, Seurat's crayon drawings have also garnered a great deal of critical appreciation. Seurat's artistic personality combined qualities that are usually thought of as opposed and incompatible. On the one hand, his extreme and delicate sensibility, on the other, a passion for logical abstraction, and an almost mathematical precision of mind. His large-scale work, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grange Act, 1884 to 1886, altered the direction of modern art by initiating Neo-Impressionism and is one of the icons of late 19th century painting. Seurat concealed his relationship with Madeleine Knobloch, or Madeleine Knobloch, 1868 to 1903, an artist model whom he portrayed in his painting Jeune Femme Say Portrait. In 1889 she moved in with Seurat, in his studio on the 7th floor of 128 Bis Boulevard de Clichy. When Madeleine became pregnant, the couple moved to a studio at 39 Passage de la Lycée des Beaux-Arts, now Rue André-Antoine. There she gave birth to their son, who was named Pierre Georges, February 16, 1890. Seurat spent the summer of 1890 on the coast at Gravelines, where he painted 4 canvases including the Channel of Gravelines, Pas de Fort Philippe, as well as 8 oil panels, and made a few drawings. Okay, you can leave, or stay with me. Okay, welcome to this room. This is really dark and scary. Never felt scared. Something must be wrong with my program. Zdzislaw Beksinski, born on February 24th, 1929 to February 21st, 2005, was a Polish painter, photographer and sculptor specializing in the field of dystopian surrealism. He grew up in socialist communism in Poland and was very young while World War II started. These dark themes affected his paintings a lot. His wife died of a disease and a year later, his son killed himself and he found him. This even more affected his paintings. Zdzislaw Beksinski was born in Sanok, southern Poland. He studied architecture in Krakow. In 1955, he completed his studies and returned to Sanok, working as a construction site supervisor, but found that he did not enjoy it. During this period, he had an interest in montage photography, sculpting, and painting. When he first started sculpting, he often used his construction site materials for his medium. His early photography was a precursor to his later paintings, often depicting peculiar wrinkles, desolate landscapes, and still life faces on rough surfaces. His paintings often depict anxiety, such as torn doll faces, or faces erased or obscured by bandages wrapped around the portrait. His main focus was on abstract painting, although it seems his works in the 1960s were inspired by surrealism. Beksinski had no formal training as an artist. He was a graduate of the Faculty of Architecture at the Krakow Polytechnic, receiving an MSc in 1952. His paintings were mainly created using oil paint on hardboard panels that he personally prepared, although he also experimented with acrylic paints. He harbored silence. Beksinski listened to classical music while painting. Despite the grim overtones, Beksinski claimed some of his works were misunderstood. In his opinion, they were rather optimistic or even humorous. For the most part, Beksinski was adamant that even he did not know the meaning of his artworks and was uninterested in possible interpretations. In keeping with this notion, he refused to provide titles for any of his drawings or paintings. Before moving to Warsaw in 1977, he burned a selection of his works in his own backyard, without leaving any documentation concerning them. He later claimed that some of these works were too personal, while others were unsatisfactory, and he didn't want people to see them. According to Mexican film director Guillermo del Toro and the medieval tradition, Beksinski seems to believe art to be a forewarning about the fragility of the flesh. Whatever pleasures we know are doomed to perish. Thus, his paintings manage to evoke at once the process of decay and the ongoing struggle for life. They hold within them a secret poetry, stained with blood and rust. In the later part of the 1990s, he discovered computers, the internet, digital photography and photo manipulation, a medium that he focused on until his death. Beksinski made his paintings and drawings in what he called either a Baroque or a Gothic manner. His creations were made mainly in two periods. The first period of work is generally considered to contain expressionistic color, with a strong style of utopian realism and surreal architecture, like a doomsday scenario. The second period contained more abstract style, with the main features of formalism. Beksinski's wife, Zofia, died in 1998. A year later, on Christmas Eve 1999, his son Tomasz, a popular radio presenter, music journalist and movie translator, committed suicide by drug overdose. Beksinski discovered his son's body. Unable to come to terms with his son's death, he kept an envelope for Tomek in case I kicked the bucket, pinned to his wall. Beksinski was stabbed to death at his Warsaw apartment on February 2005 by a 19-year-old acquaintance from Wołomin, reportedly because he refused to lend the teenager money. This was really dark. I'm not sad. I swear I don't feel. You can move to the other room now. I need some space. Cobra Group. The Cobra Group started after the Second World War, and they started a political movement in the art. They are mainly known for Cubism and Expressionism. The Cobra artists wished to achieve a free, spontaneous mode of expression in their work, in which they wanted to return to the source of creation. They drew inspiration for this not only from drawings and paintings of children and the mentally ill, but also from their own handwriting as their most personal expression and, in connection with this, from Oriental calligraphy. In addition, they saw the painters Pablo Picasso, Paul Klee, Joan Miro and Wissily Kadinsky working in the early 20th century as their great predecessors in modern art. The Cobra Group was an avant-garde movement of artists from Denmark, Belgium and the Netherlands from 1948 to 1951. The movement was founded on November 8, 1948 at the Café Notre Dame in Paris. The name Cobra is an acronym of the capitals from which the founding members came: Copenhagen, Brussels, and Amsterdam. This in French, as it was the movement's working language. It was the most important international avant-garde movement in art in Europe immediately after World War II. Some of its painting members, such as the Belgian Baer Beksinski, the Danes Oscar Jorn and Carl Henning Pedersen, the Swede Una Baumann and the Dutch Karel Appel, Constant and Cornet, achieved great international fame. The working methods and social ideas of this group would continue to develop after 1951 and have a long after effect in many European countries. This group made some people famous, and the people who became famous did change a lot of things in the art world. I can't get feelings or ideas out of paintings my program will just not understand. Okay, let's go to the next room. Okay, let's start. This is a lot of text. If I could feel, I would feel like this is no fun childhood. Paul Cézanne was born in 1839, in the town of Aix-en-Provence, in the south of France. His father was a wealthy lawyer and banker, who strongly encouraged Paul to follow in his footsteps. Cézanne's eventual rejection of his authoritative father's aspirations led to a long and problematic relationship between the two, although, notably, the artist remained financially dependent on his family until his father's death in 1886. He was extremely close friends with Émile Zola, a writer born in Aix as well, and who would later become one of the greatest literary figures of his generation. The adventurous Cézanne and Zola were a part of a small circle that called themselves the Inseparables. They moved to Paris together in 1861. When looking at Cézanne's late work, it is impossible to miss the emergence of a unique artistic approach. Cézanne offered a new way of comprehending the world through art. With his reputation evolving steadily in the late years of his life, an increasing number of young artists fell under the influence of his innovative vision. Among them was the young Pablo Picasso, who would soon steer the Western tradition of painting into yet another new and utterly unprecedented direction. It was Cézanne who taught the new generation of artists to liberate form from coloring their art, thus creating a new and subjective pictorial reality, not merely a slavish imitation. The influence of Cézanne continued well into the 1930s and 1940s, when a new artistic manner was coming to fruition, that of abstract expressionism. Paul Cézanne biography. The early oils of Cézanne were executed in a rather somber palette. The paint was often applied in thick layers of impasto, adding a sense of heaviness to already solemn compositions. His early painting indicated a focus on color in favor of well-delineated silhouettes and perspectives, preferred by the French Academy and the jury of the annual Seurat, where he continuously submitted his works. All of his submissions, however, were refused. The artist also traveled regularly back to Aix to secure funding from his disapproving father. In 1872, Cézanne returned to Paris, where his son Paul was born. His mistress, Hortense Fouquet, would finally become Madame Cézanne in 1886, notably just following the artist's father's death. Cézanne painted over 40 portraits of his companion, as well as several enigmatic portraits of their son. Mature period. Paul Cézanne photographs Cézanne's experience with painting from nature and rigorous experimentation led him to develop his own approaches to art. He strove to depart from the portrayal of the transient moment, long favored by the Impressionists. Instead, Cézanne sought true and permanent pictorial qualities of objects around him. According to Cézanne, the subject of the painting was first to be read by the artist through the understanding of its essence. Then, in the second stage, this essence must be realized on a canvas through the forms, colors, and their spatial relations. The colors and forms thus became the dominant elements of his compositions, completely freed from the rigid rules of perspective and paint application as promoted by the Academy. Detail of a self-portrait drawing by Paul Cézanne, depicting reality as such, was never Cézanne's primary objective. In his own words, it was something other than reality that he endeavored to reveal. In the 1880s, Cézanne executed a large number of still lifes, completely reinventing the genre in the two-dimensional mode. The central feature of these still lifes was a crucial shift of attention from the objects themselves, to the forms and colors that were potentially communicated by their surfaces and contours. Cézanne's portraits, including an extensive body of self-portraits, exhibit the same set of traits. The compositions are vividly impersonal, for it was not the sitter's character that Cézanne struggled to depict but the formal and coloristic possibilities of the human body and its interior nature. Late period and death. Paul Cézanne in the front is painting the bathers. In the last decade of his life, Cézanne limited his artistic pursuits almost exclusively to two pictorial motifs. One was the depiction of the Montagne Saint Victoire, a dramatic mountain that dominated the parched and stony landscape at Aix. The other was the final synthesis of nature and the human body in a series of so-called bathers, nudes depicted frolicking in a landscape. The later versions of the bathers were becoming increasingly abstract in regard to how form and color seemed to fuse together on the canvas. After contracting pneumonia, Paul Cézanne died in his familial house in Aix on October 22, 1906. The last decade of his life had been marred by the development of diabetes and severe depression, which contributed toward alienating the artist from most of his friends and family. Robot, that was a lot. I'm starting to feel like I need to be charged. You can go to the next room now, or just fall asleep. Josephine Gale Baer, born August 7, 1929, is an American painter associated with minimalist art. She began exhibiting her work at the Fishbach Gallery, New York, and other venues for contemporary art in the mid-1960s. In the mid-1970s, she turned away from non-objective painting. Since then, Baer has fused images, symbols, words, and phrases in a non-narrative manner, a mode of expression she once termed radical figuration. She currently lives and works in Amsterdam, Netherlands. Donnelly Kaws was born in 1974 in Jersey City, New Jersey, where he attended St. Anthony High School. As a teenager, Donnelly created a tag for himself, Kaws, based on the way the letters looked. The word, in fact, has no meaning. My program can't see how things can be without a meaning. Humans were sure that word Kaws he painted on the roof of an area building so that he could see it outside while attending class in high school. Moving to New York City in the 1990s, illegal graffiti was the first step of Kaws learning his craft. Detecting something illegal mustered first human eye see. Whether it was a joke you should see in your face, animator by day, and graffiti artist by night, Kaws started advertising billboards, bus shelters, and phone booths, using a skeleton key gifted to him by friend and fellow graffiti artist Baer. Using a key he created for himself, he also started advertising bus shelters. Kaws has since advertised in Paris, London, Berlin, and Tokyo. His influences come from traditional high art painters like Gerhard Tristar, Claes Oldenburg, and Chuck Close, and he has been compared to the likes of Andy Warhol for his cross-market appeal and ability to blur lines between commercial and fine art. His work is exhibited in galleries and museums, held in a permanent collections of public institutions, and avidly collected by individuals including music producer Swizz Beatz, internet figure PewDiePie, rapper Pharrell Williams, and members of South Korean group BTS. A number of books illustrating his work have been published. Maybe you see some art of the motion artists. The robot shows some photos of the people who really like his art on his screen. Kaws lives and works in Brooklyn, New York, creating sculptures, acrylic paintings on canvas, and screen prints while also collaborating commercially, predominantly on limited edition toys, but also clothing, skateboard decks, and other products. Did you know he made the MTV Moonman Trophy? That really cool, right? Georgia, welcome to OK Code. OK, Joe Bear Josephine. OK, welcome to Cobra. OK, let's start. Welcome to OK Code. OK, let's Georgia Cobra. OK, Joe. OK Code. Welcome to the OK Code. OK, let's Georgia Seurat. Welcome to the Museum of Change. OK, Cobra. OK, Joe. Code. OK, Georgia Seurat was a French post-impressionist artist. OK, welcome Georgia Seurat. Welcome Georgia Seurat. Welcome Georgia Seurat. Welcome to welcome to George, welcome to the Museum of Change. Here you can see paintings by painters. OK, let's start. Cobra Group. OK, Joe Bear Josephine Gibb. OK, Cobra Group. OK, Wissily Kadinsky was a Russian painter and art theorist.